This video is supported by MANSCAPED. Check them out in the link in the description below. Alright guys, this is one I've been thinking about for a little bit and it's a little controversial. I want to tread lightly with this topic and hopefully you don't get your feathers ruffled. Today I want to talk about, is riding a motorcycle on the street worth it? Now, I want to preface this by saying that it's usually the easiest way and the most common way that people have to begin riding a motorcycle is to get their license, go out in the street, start practicing, mingle with traffic, do that whole thing. Motorcycles are readily available and it's a great way to get in a lot of seat time. However, what I want to talk about today is what are some of the pros and cons of riding on the street, maybe something you haven't thought of when it comes to riding off-road and on track and on trails and stuff like that, or is it more dangerous, or are you running a higher risk by doing so? So today I want to get into that a little bit, explain my thoughts when it comes to riding on the street, some of my experience with riding on the street, and let's get into it. Before we begin though, I have something very important to tell you. It's something you need to do right now. You gotta smash the subscribe button. We're trying to get to 1 million subscribers. Do me a solid here, hit the subscribe button down below. We're gonna get to 1 million before the year is up. I guarantee it, and there'll be a Turbo Hayabusa ready to go at 1 million subscribers on this channel. So do it. All right, so what I want to say is I currently ride on the streets. It's not as much as I used to. I used to pretty much ride every day on the street back of many years ago, but now I would say I do it maybe once or twice a week, but I still do ride on the street. I know a lot of guys who don't ride on the street anymore at all. A lot of racing and dedicated track day guys and that sort of thing. They literally do not ride a motorcycle on the street. I know a lot of adventure guys and on trails and off-road kind of guys who also have chosen to not ride on the street. And I also know some guys who only ride on the street, guys who don't go to the track or don't go to trails or stuff like that. So I think that everyone needs to find their own risk tolerance, their financial ability to afford doing it and what they see fit. And the important thing to remember here before we get into these pros and cons is that motorcycling does not give the same thing to everyone. For example, for me, I seek adrenaline and thrill when it comes to riding my motorcycles. It's why I compete with them. It's why I like racing my motorcycles. It's why I like putting my mettle to the test and seeing if I'm good enough to compete against people and do that sort of thing. For a lot of folks, riding a motorcycle is meditation. It's calm, relaxed time. It's a time to de-stress and that sort of thing. You know, when it comes to riding a bike, everyone's looking for something a little bit different. It's why we sell so many different types of motorcycles in the world, and it's why so many people do so many different things with them. And for some, riding on the street is really more of a means to an end. I think here in America, we have the great privilege of being able to decide whether or not we want to ride on the street because we are fortunate enough to own usually multiple vehicles and to commute with and to go to places with. But in many parts of the world, not only does it make more sense to ride a motorcycle because of how condensed the traffic is there, but typically it is also very cheap to run a motorcycle as a means to an end for commuting. So for example, in places like India, Southeast Asia, China, lots of other places in the world, parts of Europe as well, it is just simply more economical, cheaper, and simpler to have a two-wheeled motorized vehicle as your daily ride instead of owning a full car. Parking is usually at a premium, and for motorcycles, they usually just chuck them on the sidewalk and you can just go wherever you want. So that makes a lot of sense. We are very fortunate here in the US that we can kind of choose whether or not to do that with our motorcycles. So let's get into this. Riding on the street, what are the pros to doing that? So generally speaking, it is cheaper to own a street bike and ride it on public roads, even with stuff like insurance and registration and all that kinds of stuff. But like many things I'm gonna say on today's video, your mileage may vary. So if you have a super expensive, ridiculous motorcycle, your insurance is probably gonna be a whole lot more than someone who has like a simple little 250 to get them from A to B. But generally speaking, riding a motorcycle on the street, just having one bike, is going to be a lot cheaper than owning a motorcycle to go on track with, off-road with, and all that kinds of stuff. The other pro is that you typically put on way more miles when you ride on the street. If the only barrier between you and your bike and just putting on the miles is putting on your gear, stepping outside, and getting on your bike, you're probably going to ride it a whole lot more. For example, when you're riding off-road, you got to load up your bike into the back of your truck or a trailer, drive out to where you're going, spend a couple, you gotta make a whole day out of doing it, you know, spend a couple hours at the track, come back. Me, for example, one of the tracks that I'm a member of is 3 hours away from where I live, so I usually make a whole weekend out of going up to Decatur, Texas, where Eagles Canyon Raceway is, where I'm a member of, and I get usually 2 full days at the track there. I visit some friends and family, and then I come back here to Austin. So I've decided that for me and my financial situation, that makes sense. But typically, riding on the street is usually so much easier because you just jump on your bike and you just go. The other big thing about it is that it's unstructured and free. You can jump on your bike, and if you want to do a quick little 1-hour ride and go to the cafe and come back, you can do that. If you want to get your buddies together for a 5-hour group ride through the canyons, you can also do that. So generally speaking, riding on the street is going to be a lot more unstructured than doing stuff on track and off-road. Alright guys, just wanted to take a quick break from the video today and tell you about our sponsor, MANSCAPED. You probably already know who they are. They make the finest in ball shaving equipment, and I do mean that. It's good ball shaving stuff. They don't go all the way down to the skin. You're not gonna look like some crazy porn star or something like that. What they do is create the finest in male grooming products. And if you didn't know, 8 in 10 partners actually prefer for you to be trimmed up and clean downstairs. You know, you don't wanna show up to date night looking all unkempt and stuff like that. You never know when you're gonna get lucky. Am I right? So click the link down below, use the code Yammie for 20% off. Manscaped's got you covered with wipes, deodorants, fresheners, the Lawnmower 3.0, the Weed Whackers, all kinds of stuff to keep you looking your best. So if you want to be as aerodynamic as me and go as fast on the track as I do, hit the link down below, use the code Yammie for 20% off. Let's get back into it. But with all these pros do come cons to riding on the street. And the number one thing that I want to stress here is that riding on the street is carrying a substantially higher risk of bodily injury than riding on track or off-road. It's really hard to find metrics for this because people usually don't keep track of how many injuries happen on track, and it's difficult to aggregate all the different tracks around the world and around the country or something like that. But generally speaking, the risk of death and injury on a street motorcycle is substantially higher than on track. Now, I do want to make one big distinction here, is that if you are talking about motorcycle racing, that is a whole other ballgame than just riding on track or riding on trails and off-road. When you are competing with a motorcycle, your risk of injury goes through the roof. That is a very dangerous activity, even in controlled conditions. For example, I'm a member of the CMRA here in Texas, and I have competed all throughout 2020 in several races and sprint races and endurance racing. And literally every single event I have been to, I have seen multiple people getting so hurt that they have to get put in an ambulance and carted out of the facility. That is not something that happens at track days. At track days, it's usually a much lower stakes environment. People are there to learn, people are there to have fun. No one is there out trying to be the next Rossi or something like that. So on a motorcycle track day, it is definitely so much safer than doing racing or riding on the street. The other con for street riding is the type of seat time you're getting is super limited. You're basically just learning how to avoid cars and operate your motorcycle at the bare minimum level of competency. Now, a lot of people really don't like it when I say that. They like thinking that by riding their motorcycle on the street, they're becoming really good and a really proficient rider, but you're becoming a really good and proficient rider in a very limited scope and understanding of motorcycling. You are not understanding how to trail brake hard into an apex or getting super loose on the bike and doing jumps and, you know, really understanding how to operate this machine. All you're really doing is knowing how to operate it in traffic, which is a great skill. You should definitely be able to ride your motorcycle down the street safely and following all the rules of the road, but there is no way in hell you can become a great motorcycle rider by just riding on the street. It is just not possible, in my opinion. That's just my opinion because this is my video and I'm talking about what I want to talk about. And the last con that I want to talk about with riding on the street is while it's generally cheaper, it can become more expensive than riding off-road or on track due to the type of bikes you can ride. You have high insurance costs, excessive tire wear, cost of modifications, maintenance, all that kind of thing, etc., etc. You know, if you're running a Ducati, for example, you're going to have Desmos charges and all that kinds of stuff. So it can depend on the type of bike you ride. It can be cheaper, but over the long run, it might be more expensive than riding on track. So speaking of which, riding on track and off-road, the number one pro, in my opinion, is it's way more fun. There's no speed limits, there's no stopping unless you're pitting in, and you learn way more. It's a much better atmosphere than just squidding on the street. You are just gonna have way more fun when you're operating your motorcycle in a high intensity environment, going around a racetrack or going on a cool trail or doing jumps on a motocross track or something like that. It's just a blast. It is so much more fun than street riding. The other thing I wanna say is you just learn more about yourself and the bike. Like I said, track days are usually riding schools anyways, unless you're a member at a facility like I am, where you show up and it's kind of unstructured and you just get in, get out, do your track time and leave. Most entry-level track day riders are there to learn and to have fun and to progress their skill sets, which is pretty cool. It's really different than racing. I just wanna put that out there one more time. It's really, really different. And you actually get to go fast if you want. If you're on a dirt bike, you get to hit 50 or 60 miles per hour, jumping crazy stuff and having fun. If you're on a race bike or a track bike, you know, you get to really hit like 150, 160 safely in an environment where you have no fear of getting tickets. There's definitely a big difference doing 150 on a highway somewhere and doing 150 at a racetrack, especially because the 150 on the racetrack, you're probably braking into a really solid braking zone and actually flicking the bike into a corner instead of just going really fast in a straight line, which isn't that fun. A couple cons about riding on track and off-road. And number one, there's no two ways about it, it is really expensive. Between trailering, tires, membership fees, track day fees, mods, tuning, it is a really expensive hobby that just adds up and up and up and up. You will roast a lot of money doing on-track and off-road stuff. Just ask anyone who's into it how much money they've spent, and they're gonna look around and make sure their partner or their significant other's not around so they can maybe tell you how much they've spent. There's a great quote that I love about racing motorcycles, which is even more expensive. It is, how do you make $1 million racing motorcycles? Well, you start with $2 million, right? And it's very true. You spend a lot of money doing this. There's no two ways about it. The other cons about it is that you get a lot less seat time. So most guys can only do maybe 4, 5, 6 track days per year at the most, because they gotta make a whole weekend out of it. You gotta balance family, you gotta balance work, you gotta balance all these things. So it's a little bit harder to get a lot of seat time doing that. Riding off-road is a little bit easier, just to you know, hit your local trail or something like that. But you'll typically get a lot less seat time in than you would just riding on the street. I myself am of the opinion that the quality of that seat time is a lot higher than just riding on the street, but that can be discussed in the comments down below. But look, at the end of the day, and I wrote this down here and I'll try to read it off, riding on the street presents more risk. It's up to you to mitigate that risk. You gotta make good choices. You gotta keep riding safe. There's millions of riders around the world who've been riding on the street for their whole lives and have maybe only had 1 or 2 incidents on the road and are still happy in riding on the street. I wanna make that really clear. If you make good choices and you ride well, you can ride on the street and have a lot of fun. But, and this is a big but, there's always just one car who could be on their phone looking away and just rear ends you, and you didn't do anything wrong, you did all the right things, and someone still turned you into a paraplegic. That can happen on the street, and there are more distracted drivers every single day, and it generally is a risk that I am not very comfortable with, which is why I've massively reduced my street riding. I don't do big street rides anymore, and I certainly don't do group rides anymore just because of these types of risks. For what it's worth, this is what I do. This is my opinion on this. Most of my time on 2 wheels is spent on the track, on the trails, or off-road. I ride on the street maybe once or twice a week. Usually it's for filming videos. I don't even really ride my personal bikes that much on the street anymore. I feel like my desert sled has just become kind of a commute vehicle between my house and the office here at Yammie Noob. But you know, that's what works for me. If you're the type of guy or gal who wants to spend most of their time on the street, that's cool too. I have no grudge against you. I just think it is important for us as motorcyclists to really consider the risks and rewards of riding on the street, because it generally is getting more and more dangerous every year as people are driving more and more distracted, which sucks because as a motorcycle rider, you can't be distracted. All 4 of your limbs are engaged on this machine. You can't just whip out your phone and start texting while you're riding because you gotta work the clutch and you gotta work the throttle, right? So to me, it's a great activity because it allows you to focus in on your machine. And I wish more people would do that. But what do you guys think about riding on the street? Let me know in the comments down below. I know this is a bit of a different video here talking about this, but I'd love to hear what you have to say about it. Do you ride on the street or do you not ride on the street? I'd love to hear it down below. Let me know. I'll catch you guys in the next one. See you later. You've made it to the end of another Yammie Noob video. Aren't you a special cookie? Well, I'll tell you what, I got a gift for you. Click this right over here. You keep watching yourself some of my videos. Got some cool ones in there, got some memes, got some awesome content. I don't like the way this one's feeling, I'm gonna try it again.